What is happening out there, Roto Scouts basketball fans? Welcome to the show, gang. If anybody's out there, it's been a minute, and this was kind of a late notice pop-up show, so I understand if I'm just here talking to myself for the moment. Just here for a quick little show, run through some sim results, talk about this little two-gamer for opening night of the NBA season. Got sim results up on the screen here. The website is rotoscouts.com for anybody who might be out there who's not familiar with it. That would stun me because I don't know that anybody's even out there yet. Let me just remind everybody that we're alive. We're live now. Come hang out. There we go. Harangue some people to get in here. We'll see if anybody shows up. But for the moment, it's just me talking to myself about rotoscouts.com, the website that I run, where you can get access to all of these projections for NBA. Right now, you're just getting the NBA projections. You're getting the standard deviation, all the salary info, obviously, along with the players. You're getting our projections for FanDuel, for DK. And then we go through these numbers on the show. Whether I can put some sims up on the website as we go through this season depends. It's really difficult to get that stuff updated through the day and keep it consistent where it actually means something while updating the various projections and doing shows and everything. We'll see what we can get to. Maybe at least a starting, version of this for the day. Your starting point is here. Know that you're going to be completely different. For today, when we talk about this, we'll run through some of these above belows on our sim results, and not all that much is necessarily going to change ahead of lock. We've got a lot of known knowns. Everything is kind of set. Obviously, the unknown somebody could trip over the baseline on their way out to the court, and then we have a whole different story. But for right now, kind of a tame first night, which is good. Tomorrow, I think it's going to be total pandemonium. We've got a lot of news dropping for tomorrow already, though. There's some people here. Ugly 8 Games here. Anthony Taylor. What's going on, guys? Good to see you. It's been a minute. I took a couple weeks for myself just after baseball regular season wound down. A couple of them I was trying to get shows done and just ran out of time for football. And then a couple of them I just had stuff going on where it was just like, all right, my week is a shambles. And it takes so long to get that football article written every weekend that it's gone toward that. But I'll try and get back for football shows for this weekend as well. Now that we're back in gear with basketball main slate shows, you can expect this show hopefully a little bit earlier in the afternoon most days. Just behind obviously with opening day. We also had a 10-game NHL slate to get through today, so a lot of players to spot check for the NHL. Let's kind of dive on in now that we got a few people here hanging out. Just 2 games up. We've got the Rockets and OKC. OKC favored by 6.5 in a home game, 227.5 point total there, 226.5 in the other one. That one's a little bit closer point spread wise, just 2.5 between Golden State and LA. Golden State favored on the road. So we've got OKC topping the board at a 117 point implied total. Golden State a 114.5, number 2, 110.5 on the Rockets is the bottom of the board, and LA at 112. Not a crazy ton of separation between those teams, though, or between either game, with both, not terrible totals, but also not incredible 240 and change type totals, 250 type totals. So a little bit light, bites into the projections somewhat. By the way, scrolling across the bottom of your screen there, you'll notice that promo's still running. I just kind of left it open. Week free, promo code week free. All in caps, all one word. Just like you see it scrolling across the bottom of your screen. Gets you your first week of access to Roto Scouts for free. And that includes everything. So you'll get basketball, you'll get hockey, and you'll get football this week. So pick that up. Check out the site if you like it. Ongoing access to all of those things, all in price, under $1 a day for all of it. Not per sport, no nonsense. Cujo's here, NBA back. Yeah, buddy. Good to see you. So let's dive on in. I ran these sims over at our site, our partner site, acemind.io, where we like to get in with those guys. They are very, very affordable for the tools that they offer. And I take our projections. We drop them in with some third-party ownership right now from a different site that some of you know where it comes from. Hit and miss ownership, I would say. But what we're looking at here is our exposure in our top 150, whether we're above or below, and to some sort of degree of that on our exposure versus the public ownership. That's what the arrows indicate. Blue over here, FanDuel, green over here, DraftKings, and then just stats across the board over this way. It's kind of buried out of the way over there. What can you guys actually see? We've got everything is actually on the board. As usual, I think best way to go. We'll dive in a little position by position. We'll cut by DraftKings positioning. We'll start with the guards. Almost forgot the insy outsies. One of the most important things. News came out during the day. Maxi Kleber is out. He was only projected at like 2 minutes, 4 minutes, something like that at the beginning of the day. He's going to be apparently missed like 2 weeks, so he's gone. Jonathan Kuminga is reportedly going to start ahead of Al Horford. I had those guys splitting 24 minutes apiece anyway. Haven't changed anything. I could easily see Kuminga playing up to 30, Horford playing a little bit lighter depending on how they go. Kuminga actually started the day as probable, but seems like he's obviously going to be full go there. Jimmy Butler's probable. Isaiah Crawford is questionable, and then our outs, some important ones: Dorian Finney-Smith, Jay Sean Tate, Freddie Van Vliet, unfortunately lost for most of the season. Isaiah Joe, a little bit of an impact there. Thomas Sorber, Nikola Topic, Jalen Williams, Kenrich Williams, DeAnthony Melton, Mo Moody, Alex Tui, LeBron James, Maxi Kleber, and Adu Thiru. So I had Maxi out in the original list, and I didn't catch that I had him out when I pulled it off the injury report. I had him projected and then put it up as news during the day. I just noticed that. It was about a 15-minute split between when I put it up there and then when I updated it, but didn't realize I had him in the original list. But obviously, big impact from LeBron being out, pushes Luka up the board fairly nicely as just the go-to star there, but some distributed impact from that as well. Definitely some impact from Melton and Moody, both missing for the Dubs, and then some up and down impacts on those other spots in the OKC Houston game, but definitely in that late one, a few key players out, and the Isaiah Joe absence, nothing to sneeze at when we talk OKC among these guards. As we can see, top of the board, Mr. Luka Doncic. I believe he's the leading projection on both sites. It's close between him and SGA a couple spots later. But we're getting to tons and tons of Luka, which makes a ton of sense. It's relatively close to the field on both sides, but we are over the field's number a little bit on both sides. 54% exposure on our top 150 on FanDuel. 69% is a pretty nice number on the DraftKings slate. I don't think we need to sell Luka Doncic too hard, especially without LeBron James there. Just going to be doing whatever he wants to do. 1.53 DraftKings points, 1.64 FanDuel points, or 1.48 FanDuel points. Got to hide the previous year's columns. It's 2023. We'll get 2025, 26 numbers in here soon enough. So 148, 153 for Luka across sites. Obviously outstanding. Getting decent exposure, but essentially level with the field here on Austin Reeves, kind of in the middle of the board. Obviously a respectable enough go-to kind of a play. Over a point per minute pretty nicely on both sides. 103 on FanDuel, 1.07 on DraftKings. We're getting a lot of them on the FanDuel slate as well, but slightly below the field. He's more expensive relative to the FanDuel cap, 7,900. Both shooting guard and small forward eligible over there, where he's only shooting guard eligible on the DraftKings slate. Little bit of an impact to that, but obviously there's plenty of upside. I got him at 35 minutes. Could go a little bit beyond that. Could fall a little bit short of that. We've got some flexibility of minutes tonight. Cubs was asking me about that earlier. Just are there any flexible spots for minutes? And I was like, yeah. Opening night, there are some spots where we're kind of just doing some guesswork. But some of the more solid spots in the upper mid 30s, I think we can be more secure with guys like Austin Reeves, obviously guys like Luka and SGA. A wild card on this slate, much more so on the DraftKings board at 3,200. Gary Payton. He's going to be picking up a few minutes from the absence of some of those guards on the Golden State side. 0.96 per minute last season on DraftKings, 0.99 per minute on FanDuel. He's a very low usage player, but he gets his hands on the ball, makes some hustle plays. If he's going to be out there I've got him at 16 minutes and 16 fantasy points, around a point per minute, slightly over what he did last year, but more than capable of doing that on any given slate. On FanDuel, came up 7% of the time, essentially level with the field, and nothing impact over there for 3,700, even with the MPE. On DraftKings at 32, he came up in 57% of DraftKings lineups. That is our, I believe, highest over the field player. It's a complete wild card. Again, if he slips to, even if he just goes out there and plays 12 minutes and a couple of event-based scores don't happen for him, you easily lose ground with that. But he is very, very cheap as a building block on a two-gamer. So he's just working his way into a lot of lineups just by virtue of being that building block on DraftKings. Really not a significant ceiling play, in terms of he's not going out there and getting you 40. But just at that price, just slots in and you put other things around him. Works pretty well that way. SGA's SGA, monster opportunity, 158 last year on both sites. A little bit below the field at 42% on FanDuel, right at the field at 50% on the DraftKings slate. If you can get more SGA, you take more SGA. It's really a no-brainer as far as his ceiling, his upside. Could easily lead the slate, even with Luka there with no LeBron. But a few more mouths to feed for OKC, obviously. A challenging enough matchup against Houston as well. But it is SGA, monster spot. You definitely want a lot of them. A little bit lighter than the field, though, on the FanDuel slate. Just to take him off the board, Steph at 8,100 is coming up like crazy on FanDuel. 75% above the field. That is our biggest above the field play on FanDuel, it looks like. Not a bad option. 8,100 over there. He's 9,300 on DraftKings. That exposes the difference between how these two sites have him priced pretty well. Still played at 134 on DK, 127 on FanDuel last year. Still Steph Curry in there. Had some big games down the stretch. 15% exposed and below the field on the DraftKings slate, a 4.69 value score. Remember, 5.5 is what we're looking for on DraftKings, 5 on FanDuel. So we've got a lot of guys, and especially, 2-game slate, not a lot to work with. So 5.5 might be a stretch for anybody on this slate. But Steph, notably below value on the DraftKings board. Still want him. Still would take him. And if he's going to be low owned, it could be just a pivot point a little bit on a short slate where you just take the ceiling of Steph a few times. But right now, via the numbers, via the math, significant opportunity on FanDuel, significant down spot on DraftKings. And then we get some of these OKC guys. Lou Dort, Cason Wallace, AJ Mitchell. We're getting tons and tons of Cason Wallace on the FanDuel slate at 42%, where he's coming up at 10% on DraftKings. We're getting some Lou Dort level with the field at 31% on FanDuel, 34% on DraftKings, but just level with the field on both sites on him. And then Mitchell at 3,700 on FanDuel. I gave him 20, but he could play more than that. 1.3% exposed. Most significantly, 10% exposed and hard below the field on DraftKings at 3,800. I think a number of those shares are going in Gary Payton's direction. Well, actually, no, they're not. Well, maybe through the guard spot they are. But just taking a bit of a hit versus the field on the DraftKings slate. Javier, what's going on, buddy? Good to see you. Jake Swale says, I miss the days where AI meant Allen Iverson. Yeah, you and me both, pal. Although I have to fully confess, there are AI images used on Roto Scouts because fuck that, I'm not going to pay a graphic designer and I can't draw. We get more subscribers, I promise you guys, we'll pay graphic designers. For right now, those are AI generated images. I think they actually come out pretty good. But yeah, is it worth that boiling in the oceans to do that? No. I think people should just click on it because it's good content, whether there's an image there or not, honestly. So where were we? AJ Mitchell, again, under the field on both. Barely a factor on the FanDuel slate at that price, at least right now. But if he goes out and plays, even 4 more minutes at those prices, could easily bend the slate a little bit. Marcus Smart, another one of those wild card guys. Coming at 22 minutes, not a big impact to the slate. Handful of shares, sub 10%, but level with the field on FanDuel, sub 10% level with the field at both guard spots on DraftKings for about the same price. 0.96 per minute last year, DK 0.95 FanDuel. He's fine. It just doesn't look like anything special. If I have a few shares, I probably wouldn't rush to take him out, but I wouldn't really look at him as a big upside spot. 4.33 value score on DK, 4.27 on FanDuel. Well short of the mark. Amin Thompson and Podziemski, 2 upside minutes players. We're getting a lot of Amin on the FanDuel slate, 71% over there. He's another very differentiated player. 8% and well below the field on the DraftKings slate at 7,900. Little bit of a price point difference there. Tremendous opportunity in the starting point guard role. No Freddie VanVleet. But obviously, there's a couple high volume, big time mouths to feed. So maybe he doesn't get, full opportunity from time to time. Love the spot. 79 feels like the right price. I think it's a decent projection. 4.6 on the value, 4.9 on the value on FanDuel, though. He was a 1.11 FanDuel per minute player last year, 1.07 on DraftKings. So there's plenty of ability there. And he spiked a few big games for us last year. Don't mind if I do on the FanDuel slate at 71. This is a differentiation spot, though. At that DraftKings price, we're just soaking so much ownership up through those spots that he kind of falls by the wayside, and that's the biggest price point to sacrifice. Obviously, leaving a very good player on the board, you want to have some, but I think undercutting the field, even if you take this up, bring it up to more of like that kind of an angle against the field, maybe that's around that 15% mark. Maybe it's at the expense of some Steph Curry, maybe it's along with, depending on how you do it. I think that would be reasonable. Undercut still, but maybe by a little bit less, just given the short slate and the pure upside ability of that kid is one of the few players who could spike a true ceiling score on this slate. Podziemski in the mix for, similar type praise at a cheaper price. Fewer minutes, though. I've got him at 29 right now, 5,700 both guard spots on FanDuel, 66 different impact on the DraftKings slate. Very separated by price. Again, 44% level with the field on FanDuel. 3% slight undercut to the field on DraftKings. It's a nothing spot on DK. That is probably 6-8% ownership to be level with the field. So if you're just picking spots where you're looking for good player, low ownership, reasonable number of minutes, reasonable expectation of production, and the field is just low, regardless of where the sim might land you, that is a spot where, hey, I could double the field's ownership and still be at like 15% Podziemski. And that's not a crazy position to take, but you're taking an anti-sim position by doing that, just to artificially get away from the field in the technically wrong direction, if you get me. But it is a thing that can be done, right? On a 2-game slate, I got to find some things that can be done rather than maybe necessarily smart math-based ideas. But he healed a couple spots later. The only other significant spot down the board, 13% exposed on FanDuel. He's 4,200 shooting guard and small forward eligible. I'd be curious where most of those shares fell. 0.87 FanDuel points per minute last year, but he's fine. He can go out there and do his thing for a few minutes and easily pay off that price. But we're below the field and still getting our 13%, 13, 15. I don't think I would want more than 20% buddy in this spot unless something changed with that number. So I'm fine with it on FanDuel. Take what I get, but not really looking to get exposed to it. Otherwise, just a couple onesie-twosie shares of anybody else. Gabe Vincent, another wild card, 37, 35, is very, very cheap. So there is a little bit of back and forth with him, with Marcus Smart, as far as where those minutes actually fall. But just not good. 0.58 per minute last year on DK, 0.57 per minute. So even if he goes out there and plays 26 minutes beyond the 20, 4 beyond the 22 I gave him, you're not getting anything from him. He's not good. So I don't really mind him falling by the wayside. Nobody else down there looks overly relevant. If I miss anybody, throw it out there. I am wide open to suggestions on the first day of the season. Let's jump over to the forwards. Breezing on through this thing. Look at us. It's probably going to be the shortest show of the year. Beyond the rabbit hole. What's up, bud? Yeah, happy to be back. Good to see you. Sam Worry, thank you very much, bud. I appreciate you. Scrolling across the bottom of your screen for anybody who's not usually here with us, anybody just stumbling across us on the first day of the season looking for something new. Promo code WEEKFREE at rotoscouts.com gets you behind the scenes for a week for free. Your first week is free. No commitment required. I mean, you do have to put in your information and everything, but you can cancel it, not pay for that second week unless you're killing it and you really like what you find. But that gets you access to NBA, NHL, and NFL, and the World Series for MLB. All 4 sports going on right now. No time like the present to jump in, and you can get it for free for a week. Let's jump to what's up with Laravia. Laravia is another guy. He's just cheap. He's right around that same projection that we had on, the Mitten, for a similar kind of a price. Mitten was like 32, and we were getting more of them, I think. But that 16-point projection was right in that same range, and he's coming up a little bit, 38% on the DraftKings slate. That's essentially level with the field. I just got him in there for 20 minutes. It could be a little bit, though, of, up and down minutes at the back of these benches. Will New York's manager make it to next season? I assume we're talking baseball with Aaron Boone. It seems like both Boone and Cash are going to be there for another year. They already announced the third base coach and the bullpen coach are not coming back because it's obviously those guys' fault. But yeah, look, the Yankees had a good season. I mean, it was a killer lineup. everybody seems to forget that they were working without a guy named Garrett Cole all year. So there are reasonable things to point to where you could be like, this worked against him a little bit. I don't think Aaron Boone had a great season. I wouldn't bring him back. I would have fired him several years ago, but they seem to like him, or he's just got dirt on Cashman. Caruso is only small forward on DraftKings. Yes. Another player who kind of questions. I've got him at 22. I've seen him lower. I've seen him higher. At 22 minutes, he's around a point per minute guy, 0.99 on DraftKings last year, 1.05 on FanDuel. We're right here on the board if you're looking for him. He came up 10% of the time, just fine on FanDuel, but below the field by a little bit. Not a crazy, crazy hard undercut. If you came up level with the field on FanDuel, you're probably okay. DraftKings, it's kind of similar, but I don't know that I would want those additional shares on DraftKings, right? Like the get to level with the field is probably a matter of 5-8% on FanDuel, where, yeah, it's probably a similar kind of a number, maybe even smaller, but it's taken me from 28, which is already pretty significant on a guy that I'm not sure is going to be out there for more than 20 minutes, into the 30% range and beyond. And I don't really love how that would impact the slate. So I think this kind of a level 25, 28% would be about the extent of my interest in Caruso, unless we get, Alex Caruso starting and expected to play 30 minutes tonight or some kind of thing like that, which not the craziest idea. I don't think it's going to happen, but you never know. And this OKC team, again, they just have frustrating depth. Even when they're missing pieces, they've got frustrating depth and they use it. They are very, very willing to just spread minutes around. No need to run Caruso into the ground early in the season either. Draymond standing kind of tall up at the top of the board. 62% and above the field on FanDuel. 82% and above the field on DraftKings. 30 minutes, right around a point per minute. 30 minutes, 30 points. He played at 1.01 last year, 1.02 on FanDuel. I've just got him out there being Draymond, doing Draymond things for 30 minutes. And he's coming up like crazy. I don't know that maybe the field is just behind the curve on a guy that we know pretty well. Nothing overly intimidating about that matchup for him. I could see Draymond being just fine here. 5.12. One of the few guys above the value score on FanDuel. It's him. It's a very significant Aaron Wiggins, whose number we'll get to in a second, at that glaring green 5.89 value score. And then Chet at 5.13. And we're getting tons of Chet. And we're getting way more Aaron Wiggins. On DraftKings, Draymond is the only guy close to the value threshold at 5.3. Again, we're looking for 5.5 on DK. Am I remembering that correctly? It's 5.5 on DK, 5 on FanDuel. It's not the other way around, right? Either way, Draymond is pulling a very nice points per dollar value number on both sides. VA Prince, I don't think Capella plays that much. 10, 12 minutes, something like that. That seems to be the general consensus. He's banged up a little bit in preseason, I believe, but more to the point, he's just buried by size on that on their depth chart. There's just so many. I mean, there's two, true guys ahead of him. And then there's just a lot of pieces they can move around to, still go big and just not need him. I wouldn't be stunned, as I said to Cubs earlier, if he played 16. I've got him, I think, at 10, maybe 12. But yeah, I don't see Capella getting out to like the 24-minute range. Seems to be the consensus. We're going by the information we've got. Your mileage may vary, especially once we start driving. One and only EBK. Any good picks tonight? Nope. I mean, we're talking about the exact percentages of where we are against the field in 150 lineups. So these are the picks. So yeah, Draymond standing tall up at the top of the board and projected just for a regular kind of Draymond game. Has a little bit of upside as well. Love Jabari on basically any given slate. 0.84 per minute on DK, 0.82 per minute on FanDuel. Right around a quarter of lineups on the FanDuel slate, right around the field at 40% on DraftKings. Just looking like an is who he is spot, because that's at 30 minutes. He could easily play a couple additional minutes beyond that and put up a fairly nice score. Tough matchup for everybody on kind of both sides of that game. But Jabari very much in play, 477 on the FanDuel slate, looking pretty solid once we get outside of the guys who are above 5. And 472 value on DraftKings, number 2 among forwards. Laravia, we already talked about, just a mixer at best on FanDuel, no real upside, 2% exposed. But on 38% on DraftKings, there's a little bit of value there. Fills small forward and power forward as well, so you get some flex. Tari Eason at 24 minutes, another guy who could exceed that minutes total. 114 per minute on FanDuel, 110 on DraftKings last year. He is a significant per minute contributor when he gets on the court. 29% exposed, a little bit above the field on FanDuel, 37% exposed in our 150, a little bit above the field on DK as well. That's a good piece, especially, 2-game slate. We're looking to move pieces around in that mid-range that have upside. And when we can see a guy that's visibly better points per minute than a lot of guys around him who mark out similarly for value, even at more minutes, similar minutes, that's a guy to keep in mind, especially when we're getting him a little bit ahead of the field like this in our sims. So those are the kind of, differentiator type building blocks with ceiling ability. How many DFS words can I cram into one sentence? So that's an interesting piece when you see those kind of point per minute numbers. And especially with the little bit of minutes variance on it. Chet, just, go-to guy, 126 on FanDuel, 123 last year on DraftKings. Just coming up level with the field on the DK slate. He's 500 more expensive over there, has multi-position on both sites, but the discount on FanDuel puts him over the top. He's a 464 value on DraftKings. 513 is the second highest number among these players on the screen. Forwards, mostly forwards. There are little differences from time to time among the players we have, but let's see where it ranks overall. Because, again, there's not a lot of guys over that mark. That is our second highest overall. No, third highest, sorry. 559 on Isaiah Hartenstein is number 2. So Wiggins, Hartenstein, Chet coming up as our top 3 point per dollar guys, and then Draymond right behind that group. If we're looking for good plays, again, it's a way to do it. Steph is right there. Cason Wallace is right there. That's all our guys over the 5 threshold on FanDuel. On DraftKings, our 5-5 threshold is broken only by Isaiah Hartenstein, who are getting 92% of the time. Draymond is also right there at 5-3. We're getting him a ton. And then some of these guys right in the mix as well. Luka, Austin Reeves, Gary Payton, SGA, Ayton. We'll get to Ayton. We'll get to the other centers in a second. But just interesting how those value marks work. And Chet at that one on FanDuel, kind of interesting. Does not have that on DraftKings. Steph is the same way. 8,100 for Steph over here. Monster for value as we highlighted. 93, it's fine, playable, but not coming up as a priority on the DK slate. Who we got left down the board here? Jared Vanderbilt, some backup minutes there, but not really anything special. 3,900. We're getting a little bit of them on the DK board, but a 4.25 value score, nothing overly important. A 0.89 per minute player. Could pick up some run, depending on what they do through the game and how they end up rolling those guys out there, mostly toward the end of the game. But again, nothing critical, at least from what we know right now. Kuminga with the 24 minutes I gave him, coming up a lot on FanDuel at 28% and above the field. Level with the field, 8% on DraftKings. But if you see him nudge up for minutes, especially if we get confirmed starting ahead of Al, then I think that gets a little bit more interesting. Plus, he's power forward, small forward, power forward only on the DraftKings slate. You get a little bit of upside there, but it's primarily coming through, at least right now, on the FanDuel board. Jimmy, always playable, 17%, but hard undercut to the field on the FanDuel slate. Same thing on DraftKings, pretty hard undercut to the field at 8%. I would say you're about double those marks, given where the indicator there with that arrow in terms of where the field is at. You can take a few more shares of Jimmy. He's always got upside, 113, 112 guy per minute across FanDuel and DraftKings last year. But overall, the way he's impacting this slate at those prices and these positions, we want a little bit less of them than where the field is getting, or significantly less. And that's the same for Rui. It's the same for KD. And it's the same for Buddy Hield. Each of those guys coming up below the field while still getting to him, 9%, 18%, 13% on FanDuel, less so on DraftKings. Interestingly, at 9,700, we got no shares of KD in the DraftKings sim. That's wild. I would say that we probably want more than 0 shares of KD, but he is not coming up as a significant DraftKings piece, and he's light on FanDuel. That is a spot that, given who it is, given his ability to produce, you could put your thumb on that spot a little bit and just say, all right, more so on DK, I would think, because our 0 is not a dramatic undercut, so he's probably low owned on DraftKings. Let's see what the exact number is. So just talk it through, if you could just say artificially, hey, the field is light on KD, even though he's not mathing out necessarily great. Wow, the field is light. Mid-single digits. So just the idea of I can buy on a 2-game slate a superstar like KD for an admittedly off price comparative to where other guys are, and know that he's going to come up, I think they're probably a little light, but let's call it 8 to 10% owned, while other guys are coming up in the 30s, 40s, 50s, and beyond. It does at least speak to ceiling-based opportunity. Less so, again, on FanDuel, where our 18%, I'm perfectly fine having 18% and being below the field on the FanDuel slate. Works a little bit differently. The 9,700 price is what's creating that versus the 89 on the FanDuel slate. He's more an $8,900 player these days than a $9,700 player, but that is what's pushing that ownership down to, again, the mid-single digits on DraftKings. So there is a little bit of artificial opportunity there. Everybody else on this board, nobody even came up on the DraftKings slate. We did get a little bit of Buddy on FanDuel, minor onesie-twosie shares of Al Horford, and then nobody else. Mix your match your way through those guys, but nobody's more than a wild card down there. And we'll round things out with our centers. Anybody missing on I don't think we would have anybody missing. We'll double check on FanDuel. So Hartenstein is our main guy that we haven't really addressed. Looking like an absolute beast at the top of the board. 81% on FanDuel and well above the field. 92% on DraftKings and well above the field. 5,400 on DK, 5,800 on FanDuel. I've got him at 28 minutes. I think that's perfectly reasonable for what we've seen him do. I mean, he's 27-9 on average over 57 games last year. Basically his role. And could go a little bit beyond that, given the size that they're going to be facing on the other side of that game, particularly the way that the Rockets are rolling out that starting lineup. So there could be a little bit more meat on the bone here for Hartenstein. And he's a very, very good per minute player. 119 last year on DraftKings, 121 on FanDuel. Underrated for his passing ability. Fantastic rebounder. Okay scorer around the rim. Nothing to dislike here about Hartenstein. You're just going to have a very large share of them to get well beyond the field and create a true difference. So if you're willing to embrace the essentially all-in nature on the Hartenstein play and kind of on the Draymond play right alongside him, being that far above the field at 82% on DK, that looks like our most significant above the field, where it's Hartenstein, then Draymond on the FanDuel board. But getting a lot of those guys and getting beyond the field seems like a pretty good path into this slate. And both those guys have upside and ceiling for both minutes and production beyond what they're projected for here. DeAndre Ayton's interesting. Got him at 30 minutes. I could see 32. If somebody had come to me, projected at 32, I wouldn't have called them crazy. And, as the season rolls on, 33 and 34 in the cards, but I've got a conservative 30 on it right now. Just came up at 4.6% on the FanDuel slate, pretty limited, 7,000 over there. Part of that is just we're getting so much Isaiah Hartenstein going through that spot. Some of the other pieces are a little bit able to be rotated through power forward, as you can see, but we're also making room for 10% Şengün. I'd rather have Şengün, I think, than Ayton, even with the price difference. So would the sim. So would the public, though. A couple shares of Ayton, though, in one lineup. If you're throwing one wild card entry into the big $9 on FanDuel, then taking a very low-owned center who does have upside, 1.08 per minute last season, a reasonable enough projection, just isn't our go-to value of the day, and just building a differentiated lineup from that point, as long as you can build it out to a similar point, which I'm pretty confident you can, given what we have to work with on this slate. Plenty of upside in a guy like that. So that's another one where we're just looking at that raw ownership that the public's got in the mid-single digits and saying, all right, that's a spot at which I can easily double, even triple that, and still only be 15% exposed to DeAndre Ayton. Again, sim-wise, we're coming up right with the field at 5%. There are better spots to go to. Depends on how you're approaching things. On DraftKings, he's right in the middle of the board. 50% were above the field over there at 6,300. Looking like a more critical piece, 5.09 value score on DK. So much more significant to the DK board. Right in line with both of the other guys up there at pretty hefty ownership. And you can throw Jabari Smith, who we already talked about among the forwards, into that bucket at a fair price at 5,200. Obviously, there's only so many guys to work with, so many spots to go to. A lot of public ownership is going through all four of those guys on DraftKings, but it looks correct. It looks like fairly sharp public ownership. Chet, we talked about under forwards, but again, looks terrific on FanDuel. A little bit lighter on DraftKings, right around the field at 18%. If you wanted to push that to 25, though, and gain a pretty good advantage on a 1.23 per minute player on DK, no issues with that. That's a reasonable pivot point. I wouldn't necessarily be looking to do that on, again, like a Jared Vanderbilt. That's just a value building block. He's okay to have a few shares of, but I'd probably rather be below the field unless we knew something to gain us some minutes there. Şengün is obviously spectacular in terms of his per minute numbers, 133 on both sides. Tremendous star caliber center. Priced up where he should be, 91, 92. We're not gaining any advantage there. We're coming up a little bit lighter than the field at 10% on FanDuel, 8.6 on DraftKings. I wouldn't begrudge anybody going to or slightly beyond the field on a player like Şengün, but obviously there's some competition going on with just a lot of big bodies on the court fighting for some of those rebounds and everything. So a little bit of a limiting factor there, a little bit of an impact from starting alongside Steven Adams. We'll see how quickly that changes in the first few minutes, but a little bit lighter than the field, I think, is probably the appropriate spot on a guy who is a very good player that I will look forward to days where we can get to aggressively ahead of the field on, because I like Şengün. Adams no more than a mixer, low single digits and below the field on both sides. A few shares of Horford, and then we didn't get anybody else of Jalen with a Y, Quentin Post, Clint Capella, who is a popular question, Jackson Hayes, and Ousmane Dieng. So I do have Capella at 10. Again, I can see 16 minutes here from Clint, and he's a reasonable 1 and change per minute player, but that puts him in Jared Vanderbilt territory, right? What would be the difference at his 4,500? He would be worse than that Jared Vanderbilt if we gave him those additional minutes and put him at 16, 17. It becomes more playable the more minutes you give him, obviously. But again, all accounts going to be pretty buried, at least to start the season, given the size that team can roll out without him. Let's see, a couple questions in the chat. Chet or Reeves at utility? Let's get them both up on the screen here. Chet was just kind of level. I would say probably Reeves, even though you're eating public ownership with that, just because of where that value score is. I think that's the move, but you're going to have to get different in a little bit, at least in your combinations as you go down the board from there. But that buys you a little bit at another spot, given where his value's at versus Chet for 300 more. There is a difference between those. Chet's going to be lighter owned by the public. So it really depends on what else is in that lineup and what does that spot need to do for you. Do you need that util spot to differentiate ownership? Or do you need that util spot to come through for a little bit of upside for value, and then you can upgrade another spot and get to player X at guard or whatever? So I think I lean slightly in Reeves' direction. But that's a good point, a good question, because it creates that talking point of the back and forth between, all right, what do I care more about, that public ownership and where I should be against it, or what that value mark is? And that really does come down to just what does that lineup spot in your lineup that you're building need to do for you? What's up, Absolute? Absolute Power says MLB, NASCAR, NHL, NBA, MMA, PGA, NFL. It's a busy DFS time. Woo! That's more than I'm doing. All four major sports in play right now, though, over at Roto Scouts for under $1 a day. Get access to these NBA projections. You're getting the projections right now. For NBA, you're getting full projections for hockey with all of the lines, the power play units every single day laid out for you. Full baseball projections for through the World Series still going on, and every single football game outside of Forgotten a couple of the Europe games early Sunday mornings. Sorry about that. But every single main slate, every reasonably scheduled game has been covered this season. Joseph Garnett saying, just tell me which 3 cheap guys are the plays tonight, Terry. I'll pick the stars, no problem. Yeah, I mean, we're talking about some of that. Right? That is kind of the what we're addressing through here. So I would say that the Mitten is probably in that conversation just by virtue of being super crazy, stupid cheap. Laravia is somewhat in that conversation at 36. He's pulling 38% ownership. Another guy, low projected, okay per minute, but just very, very stupid cheap. And then I would say pick your favorite of the mid-board OKC guards from Aaron Wiggins, Lou Dort, Caruso, etc. Probably the right way to go. And then, yeah, you're layering in the stars and the mid-board guys. If we're talking about less dirt cheap bargain bin types, that's where I think the importance of addressing guys like Hartenstein, like Draymond come in, where those guys aren't necessarily stars, apologies to them and their reputations, but they are big-time upside pieces on both this slate and just in their general ability to produce on the court. They're both a little bit cheap today. So it's like cheap for them, cheap versus the slate, just dirt cheap in general. And those are 3 different talking points. Yeah, Josh, the Rockets going very, very big to start. Şengün and Adams in there. And then obviously KD's a giant. That is a big team. And that's just kind of why I buy into the idea that Capella's just knocked down the board. They're not going to need him. When somebody gets hurt, then they'll go to him. There will be days, I'm sure, where Adams gets rest and he's in and so on. But starting out today, it's could be beyond a couple minutes beyond what we've got, but doesn't look like any kind of priority, even when we consider value. VA Prince was asking, do we prefer KD or Steph? I think Prince plays on DraftKings as well, and I think that was strongly Steph, right? Oh, no, that's right. Steph's value was coming on FanDuel at 81, differently priced, 93 on DraftKings. I think we are still getting more of Steph, though, because we got him like 15% of the time. Looks like the field is probably in like the 20% range. And then KD, we got no shares of through that sim, but that was the one I was talking about, Prince, where I was saying like KD, just his raw public ownership is literally around 5%. So just the upside nature of a player like KD, knowing that the field is going to be at 5, you can pay that bad price for him to beat that ownership share, because that's an easy number to get beyond the field on, and he is the guy you can get beyond the field easiest on, who's going to provide the highest raw ceiling score. Can you make that up in $1,300 of value elsewhere by playing guys like, Austin Reeves, Gary Payton, and so forth? Yeah, I think that would be the approach. So again, it does kind of come down to what we're looking for. Who plays better through the sim? Steph. Who can you kind of make an angle play on? I think is KD. But KD doesn't math out great at that price and his positioning. There are guys soaking up tons of shares at those positions. So it's just kind of the nature of the DraftKings slate too. Like we're taking our value shares a lot from like the mid-board guys through small forward, power forward. And KD's price just unfortunately boxes him out of those shares somewhat. You could easily say, all right, I'm going to sacrifice my 8% of Jimmy, who we're getting less than the field on anyway, as, all right, that's my starting point for how do I get to KD shares. And then I just need to find 1,700 per lineup spot, per lineup that I want KD in beyond that. But that's, I think, another big part of why he's getting boxed out is just where things are falling on a 2-game slate. If this was on tomorrow's slate, KD would be getting his usual probably 8, 10, 12%. Yeah, I like Eason. Power. Absolute power saying Tari Eason might go off. He didn't sign his rookie extension before the deadline. I didn't actually catch that detail. But, yeah, I just think he's a good per-minute guy who has reasonable upside for minutes beyond where I've got him projected. So, yeah, I'm into that spot. I like the Reed Shepherd spot as well. Yeah, I think there are things to juggle around down there. Josh, you like Adams more than Hartenstein? I just question what the minutes are. It depends on what we're talking about with it, obviously that's a lower end value based type of a guy who's going to be lower owned in the grand scheme of things. So easier to get beyond the field if that's your spot. And Steven Adams, there's nothing wrong with him. He's perfectly fine. I just don't think the fact that he's going to start does not mean that he's going to play 32 minutes. Right? That's a start, but he's still probably playing 22, 24, somewhere in that territory. Where Hartenstein is at 28 and could play into the 30s. So definitely a difference between what those two guys are giving you and how much time they're going to be giving it to you for. That got dirty. What else? 5:30. I know some of the bigger shows are starting up right around now. As I mentioned at the beginning of the show, we'll see where it lands tomorrow. The goal will be to have this slightly earlier in the day than 4:50 and slightly more notice than, hey, I'm going to go on in 5 minutes. But I appreciate everybody who found it. A bunch of people showed up. You guys absolutely rock. Hit the like button. Subscribe to the channel if you're new here. You get all the notifications and so on. One more time. Scrolling across the bottom of your screen all show long. Promo code WEEKFREE. Gets you a week's free access. Check things out behind the scenes. All 4 major sports are going on. That'll get you through most of the World Series. This week's football slates. I appreciate that, Ghostface. Ghostface says, you are the big show. Appreciate it, buddy. Numbers might say otherwise, but we've got the best audience out there. I'll go pound for pound with anybody's audience. Javier says, ignoring ownership, Peyton or Mitchell, or is there any other under 4K player you like instead? It is Peyton. Mitchell 0.79 per minute kind of hampers him, even though he's getting a couple additional minutes beyond Peyton's just 16. But Peyton picks up value at that $3,200 price. There's a $600 price gap between those two bargain bins. So you can see it in the value score at 5.02 versus the 4 and change, the 4.33 that Mitchell has. Oh, and it's actually, this line, sorry, 4.19 that Mitchell has. So just given the low end per minute nature of Mitchell overall, I think I would lean toward Peyton, but that is a lower minutes projection. So you're just paying for the building block, I think, with the Peyton play. Doesn't look like we got any crazy news through the show here. Doesn't look like we got any news at all. That'll be a rarity through the season, getting through an hour of discussion without having news break, or 40 minutes and change. Yeah, Laravia's in there as a mixer for sure. Gabe Vincent totally sucks. I'm really not into the Gabe Vincent one. Even if he gets minutes beyond what I've got him at, I just don't see it. He's so low end. He's 0.5 and change per minute. You're getting literally a half a point per minute out of that guy. They're just better spots. Even on a 2-gamer. I mean, he's there. He's a building block in similar ways to some of these other guys, but there are cheaper guys who are going to do more out there. Even if he plays half the minutes, Mitten's probably going to equal Gabe Vincent's score with a good shot of exceeding it. That in mind, you guys, I think we're at the end. Only so much to talk about on a 2-gamer. 60% Laravia. Where was he on? We were at 38% and essentially level with the field. So you're taking a position there, Power, on Laravia. There's nothing wrong with doing that as a value guy and just saying, all right, this is where I'm going to plant my flag for a value guy. And you're just saying that you're expecting him to go beyond some of where some of us haven't projected. And again, that's perfectly reasonable. I don't think it's crazy to think that he could play a little bit more than 20 minutes. I don't think it's crazy to think that he could produce. He's a 0.87 per minute player. There's a lot worse spots. So yeah, perfectly fine going there. But again, you are taking a little bit of a position there. But yeah, 5:40 on your clocks, guys. We got a little bit of run up to lock. Thank you very much. Guys, absolutely rock. We'll be doing this all season long. Back tomorrow. Subscribe to the channel so you see when the things get scheduled, when they go live, and however the hell that works. Hit the thumbs up on the video if you get a chance. hype the video if that's still a thing. I know they rolled it out. I haven't seen anything about it ever since, but I mention it every now and again. Good to be back, though. Good to be back for NBA. Good to be back on show in general after a couple weeks off there. Rocking and rolling. We'll see if we can get a football show in this week. Football projections will be live in a couple days. NBA projections every day. NHL projections every day. MLB projections through the World Series. Access all of it under $1 a day. First week free with promo code WEEKFREE at Roto Scouts on a weekly plan. So go check that out. Let me get out of here. I'll keep everything updated. I'll keep the news updated for our little two-gamer here. Good luck out there. Somebody go win something. Share those results when you do. Free Discord, by the way, is linked in the description below the video as well. Hop into the Discord. Come join the community and hang out. Talk shop. I'm in there for questions. A lot of good people in there for questions as well. Kick things back and forth. Thank you guys all very much. Power, Ducking, Josh, Tiz, Cujo, everybody else in the chat. Those were just the people down there at the bottom. Art Jones has a good take on it as well. Yep. That's a good position to start the season in for NBA. We know it's coming. Hopefully not on the first day. Hopefully not on the second day, but we know those days will come. But yeah, go get them tonight, gang. Good luck out there. Somebody go win something. Share those results when you do, and we'll be back tomorrow for more. Later.